at one level, America first, Britain first is kind of obvious requirement for an American or a British politician, and if you're arguing the opposite, that America should be last or Britain should be last, obviously the public won't support you. But it's how you put these countries first. What I take away from America first is a narrowing of America's perception of its interests, looking at every issue about whether it will produce an immediate benefit for the United States, whereas the benefits to the civilized world of helping to secure stability in benighted countries hundreds or thousands of miles away may not be immediately obvious, but they will still be very powerful. The benefits to us of providing overseas aid to poorer people, not immediately obvious, but to the extent that it helps to reduce conflict and bloodshed, that's important in itself, but it's also helps to provide a more stable world for British and American people to live. So that's what we have to do to take account of this. The role of the British Foreign Secretary is to represent Britain and Britain's interests around the world, and to represent them in a narrow sense about representing British citizens and ensuring there is help available to them when they're in trouble, representing our direct economic interests, so British firms, British trade, British investment, but also representing our wider interests as a country which, though in relative terms no longer quotes rules of the waves, but is still very significant. And I'm hugely heartened by the fact that on this issue of soft power, which is how can you influence and persuade other countries to do the things that you want but they currently don't want, but how do you get them to come around without the force of arms or economic sanctions? We are, on all the surveys that are done, we are at or near the top, the best in the world. And I think that's a great tribute to the character of the British people, but also to the way successive governments have seen Britain's role in the world. When I was doing it, it was a very wide-ranging department, and there were basically two aspects to it. One was order, so dealing with the hard end of the state, of the criminal justice system, prisons, of probation, of immigration, and the security service, MI5. And I was always conscious that although we may be delicate about this, that ultimately the authority of any state is enforced by force, and if you like, I was responsible for that. The other side of it was about liberty and freedom and rights, because at that stage the Home Office was also responsible for our constitutional agenda. And so it was from the Home Office that I was able to move the Human Rights Act, to get the Lawrence Inquiry established, and then to introduce really groundbreaking legislation off the back of the Lawrence Inquiry, as well as introducing the Freedom of Information Act, and then going back to the order side, introducing measures like the Terrorism Act. So there was a kind of yin and yang side to the Home Office in those days. After I'd left, a decision was made to split the department. So you've got now the Home Office, which concentrates really only on the order side, with the kind of liberty side mainly led by the Ministry of Justice. And many countries have that split. I always thought it was a good idea to have it in one department, because it meant that when you were making tough decisions about, as it were, the use of the hard powers of the state, locking people up, deporting them and so on, you were always conscious that how you use those powers had to be balanced with the needs of the liberties of the individual. The immediate challenge for United Kingdom foreign policy is to negotiate our exit from the European Union in the most acceptable way. So that's a big challenge. At the same time, we've got to stay alongside the United States, whether we like it or not, because they are the most powerful nation in the world. Many people in the British government, as well as people like me, are unhappy about what President Trump has described as his America First policy. it's fine to represent your own country's interests. All diplomats, foreign ministers, heads of government do that. But it'd be bad for America as well as the rest of the world if an America first approach leads to America withdrawing from influence in the rest of the world or defining its interests only in terms of their direct effect on American nationals or on American trade. And America benefits from a kind of liberal environment, international environment, which has been produced since the war. So that's the second challenge. The third is dealing with conflicts in the Middle East. We are less influential there than the United States or Russia, but we are still members of the Permanent Five of the Security Council. We've got good armed forces and trying to help to resolve the problem in Syria, in northern Iraq, where we've got some troops. In my view, withdrawing support from the conflict in the Yemen, and also taking more active steps at a rapprochement with Iran are four things that any sensible British government should be doing. I think the most important lesson is of understanding the effect of your decisions on other people and other nations, and appreciating where they're coming from. Because other nations' histories, other people's histories are not a carbon copy of ours here. They're very different. And what may really worry some other nation may not bother us at all, and vice versa. I think that's amongst the most important lessons I learned. First of all, it turned out I was lucky that I was able to make decisions. I had the capacity to make decisions in government, make them as best I could, and move on. And there are some people who get really stuck. They vacillate, ask for more information. I mean, sometimes I asked for more information, but most times I thought my instinct is to do this, not that, so let's do it and move on. Sometimes you get things wrong, and if you really got something completely wrong, then you should back away and change your policy. So I was lucky about what I found to be my capacity for making decisions. I have got a high work rate, and I also sleep okay. And those are nothing directly to do with me, it's just how I'm made. I also think that it's incredibly important to have means of de-stressing, and for me there were two, still are. I mean, one is taking as much exercise as possible, and the other is seeing the family.